The director kept saying, "Bookkeeping delay." Like it was a magic spell the first time the money went missing. It wasn't the number that scared me. It was how quickly I was expected to shut up about it. Alan didn't even lean forward when I said we were short. He smiled and told me, "It's just a bookkeeping delay," like I was being cute. I'm the operations manager at a mid-sized nonprofit arts center. Ceramics classes, after-school programs, a tiny black box theater that always smells like dust and old velvet curtains. It's the kind of place where people hug in hallways and call each other family, which is great until it's used to guilt you into swallowing uncomfortable questions. I'm not an accountant, but I'm the person who touches everything. I order supplies, approve invoices, manage facility stuff, and I keep a running internal ledger because our official bookkeeping is done by an outside firm that only comes once a month. It was a cost-saving decision from years ago, back when we were small and trust-based. We'd grown, but the controls never did. Everyone knew it. Everyone also pretended it was fine because Alan had donors, charisma, and 10 years of, "Look how much we've expanded." That day, I was reconciling sponsor revenue against our bank deposits and the spreadsheet wouldn't land. $4,870 should have been there. I had an email from the sponsor's assistant confirming the ACH transfer, and our deposit report showed everything else hitting cleanly that week. But the bank statement didn't. I walked it into Alan's office, expecting the normal reaction. Mild concern, quick check, maybe a call to the bank. He barely glanced at my printout. He was scrolling his phone with one thumb. "Bank posts things weird sometimes," he said. "It'll show up." I called the bank. "They don't see it," I said, keeping my voice careful. I wasn't trying to accuse him. I was trying to do my job. He finally looked up, still smiling, like I'd asked if we should buy more paper towels. "It's just a bookkeeping delay. Don't worry donors with questions. You're great at details, but don't let them eat you." It was dismissive in that soft way that makes you feel childish for bringing it up at all. I left his office annoyed at myself for being rattled. A week later, it happened again. Different sponsor. $9,200. This time I didn't go to Alan first. I called the bank again and asked them to search by date range, expected amount, anything. The representative put me on hold, came back, and said, "We're not seeing that deposit." I emailed the outside accounting firm. Their response was polite and slow, like always. They had no record of those deposits and asked for documentation. I forwarded sponsor emails and confirmations and then sat there refreshing my inbox like I was waiting for biopsy results. Alan started appearing in my doorway more after that, not with anything helpful, with distractions. "Can you prioritize the lobby signage today?" he'd ask, eyes flicking to my monitor. Or, "Why are you in the bank portal so much lately?" with a laugh that didn't sound like a joke. One afternoon he leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, and said, "We don't want to create drama out of timing issues." Drama. The word landed like a little threat wrapped in a compliment. If I pushed, I'd be labeled difficult. If I stayed quiet, I'd be complicit. The next escalation didn't come from Alan. It came from the outside firm, which was unusual because they almost never called staff directly. The senior bookkeeper's voice was tight, like she was trying not to step on a landmine. "We're getting requests to reclassify restricted funds," she said. "Is that something you're aware of?" "Reclassify how?" I asked, already feeling my stomach drop. A pause. "Moving funds designated for youth programming into general operating to cover expenses." I stared at my desk. Restricted funds are not a suggestion. Donors write checks for specific programs because they want those programs. You can't just slide money around because you're short and hope nobody notices. I went to Alan again, this time with my heart thudding hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. He didn't deny it. He leaned back like a guy explaining how electricity works. "We're floating," he said. "Nonprofits do it. The money comes in, it goes out, and then it gets put back when the next grant hits." "That's not how restricted funds work," I said. My voice sounded smaller than I wanted. He held up a hand. "It's temporary. It's timing." I hated that he was using the same language for everything. Timing. Delay. Like words could change what a bank statement showed. A few days later we had a board meeting. I wasn't supposed to stay. I was there to set up the projector and leave, but Alan was late and the board chair started with quick financials. One member asked why ticket revenue looked low while expenses were up. Another asked why sponsor revenue didn't match the report they'd seen last quarter. And then Alan arrived, breezing in mid-question with an apology and a joke about traffic. He took over like a practiced performer. He talked about cash flow hiccups, about bank posting cycles, about how the outside firm was a month behind because of their process. Then he said it again, with this calm certainty that made people stop asking follow-ups. It's just a bookkeeping delay. They nodded. I watched adults with serious careers accept that phrase because it was easier than believing the alternative. Nobody on that board wanted to be the one who implied fraud at a nonprofit arts center. It felt mean. It felt paranoid. Afterward, while I was winding cords and packing up the laptop, Janice, a retired lawyer who always showed up with a notebook and a look that made you sit straighter, hung back. "Do you feel comfortable with what you're seeing?" she asked, quietly. I should have told the truth. Instead, I gave the safe answer. "I think it's timing. Cash flow stuff." She didn't blink. "If it's not, you need to protect yourself," she said. Then she walked out like she'd just handed me a life jacket. That night I lay in bed replaying every time Alan had redirected me, every time he'd tried to make me feel like I was overreacting. In hindsight, the pattern was obvious. He never showed proof, never offered to loop in the bank, never asked the accountants to confirm anything in writing. He just kept insisting the story was delay, until everyone got bored. The next morning, I started building a quiet little file like I was prepping for court, even though I kept telling myself it wouldn't come to that. Screenshots of sponsor confirmations, the ACH trace numbers, PDFs of the bank statement, dates, amounts, who said what, and when. I saved copies off the shared drive because I suddenly didn't trust anything on our network. I told myself I was being cautious. I also knew I was scared. Then I did the thing that made my hands sweat. I called the sponsors. I didn't accuse anyone. I used my best polished voice. "We're reconciling our records and I want to confirm the payment date and method." Both sponsors confirmed immediately. One assistant sounded annoyed on our behalf and forwarded the ACH confirmation with the trace number. I stared at that string of digits like it was a weapon. Trace numbers don't care about charisma. I sent everything to the outside accounting firm. This time, they replied within an hour. They wanted a meeting with me and Alan. When I forwarded the request to Alan, he tried to shut it down. "I'm traveling," he wrote. "Let's handle it next month when things settle." I forwarded that email right back to the accounting firm, because at that point my fear had shifted. I wasn't afraid of being wrong anymore. I was afraid of being used. The Zoom meeting happened 2 days later. Alan joined from his office, sitting too upright, his smile tight around the edges. The senior bookkeeper shared her screen and walked through our reconciliation line by line. She was calm, professional, almost gentle. Then she said, "The sponsor payments were not deposited into the operating account." Alan's eyes flicked to the side. "Right, because the bank," she continued, "they were routed to a second account under the organization's tax ID." Silence. Real, heavy silence. I felt cold. "We have a second account?" I asked, and I hated how surprised I sounded. Like I was the idiot in the room. Alan jumped in fast. "That's an old account. Dormant. It was never closed." The bookkeeper didn't argue. She clicked once and pulled up a statement. It wasn't dormant. It had activity almost every week. I watched Alan's face go through tiny changes, jaw tightening, nostrils flaring, the smile dropping completely. The bookkeeper's cursor hovered over transactions that looked like consulting, and travel, and vague vendor names. Not huge numbers individually, but steady, consistent, and absolutely not something our board had ever approved in that way. In that moment, the bookkeeping delay line finally snapped into place for what it was. Not reassurance, but cover. The missing money hadn't disappeared. It had been moved somewhere only one person controlled. After the call, Alan found me in the hallway like he'd been waiting behind a curtain. "You went behind my back," he said, voice low and sharp. "I verified payments," I said. I could feel my hands shaking, so I laced my fingers together to hide it. The accounting firm asked questions. The board asked questions. I needed documentation. He stepped closer. Not enough to be overtly threatening, but enough that I could smell his cologne. "You're making this bigger than it is," he said. "It's timing. It's bookkeeping. You're creating drama?" I cut in before I could stop myself. His eyes narrowed, and for the first time he looked less like a beloved director and more like a guy who'd miscalculated how loyal his staff would be. 2 mornings later, the board chair texted me to come in early. When I arrived, Janice was already there, along with the chair and another board member I'd only seen at galas. Alan wasn't in the building. The chair looked like she'd aged a year overnight. Alan has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation, she said. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt nauseous, like I'd pushed a cracked door open and found a whole room full of rot. The investigation didn't play out like TV. There weren't cops in the lobby. There were lawyers and closed-door meetings and careful language. The outside firm did an expedited audit. The board debated what to disclose, who to call, how to protect the organization's reputation without lying. Alan resigned before they could officially fire him, which felt like a final act of control. A leadership transition, they called it in the staff email. Donors got a slightly more honest version about strengthening controls. A week after that, Alan showed up anyway. I was in the lobby unlocking the supply closet when the front doors opened and his voice carried across the space like he still belonged there. I need my personal items from my office, he said, loud enough for the receptionist to hear. The receptionist looked panicked and glanced at me like I was suddenly security. I walked over and kept my tone even. You can't be here unscheduled. The board asked for keys back. He gave a short laugh. Oh, so you're in charge now? That old charm tried to crawl back into his face, but it didn't fit anymore. He leaned in a little, like we were sharing a joke. You know you didn't have to do all this. I surprised myself by not shrinking. I didn't, I said. You did, and if you try to walk back into this building again, I'm calling the board chair and the police. Not for drama, for trespassing. For a second he looked like he might argue. Then his eyes flicked past me to the receptionist, to the security camera in the corner that we'd finally gotten installed, and something deflated in him. Fine, he muttered, and walked back out the way he came in. The board chair later told me the second account had been used for unauthorized spending disguised as operational costs. A car lease that wasn't ours. Travel invoices that didn't connect to any events. Consulting payments no one could explain. Some sponsor funds were recovered, some weren't. Insurance covered part. The rest became a painful line item in next year's budget. They offered me interim finance oversight with a real pay bump and actual access to accounts I should have been able to see all along. When I signed the new controls policy, dual approvals, weekly reconciliations, no more mystery accounts, I felt this weird mix of relief and grief. Relief that it was finally structured. Grief that it had ever been allowed to run on trust and vibes. I didn't do any of it because I'm fearless. I did it because I could feel my name quietly being positioned near the fall, and I refused to stand under it. Now when someone in leadership says, breezily, it's just a bookkeeping delay, I don't hear reassurance anymore. I hear someone testing how easy you are to silence.